So, Liam, we get this one a lot, and I think it keeps coming up a lot in Witchcraft Live at the moment. Is this kind of discussion about what to do in order to dispose of spells? What are you going to do with your leftover ingredients after you've burnt your candles or you've made your poppet? You've finished with the spell work, you consider it done, and now you're needing to some way get rid of all the items. And I kind of feel like the most obvious thing that I always go to is, well, when you were planning your spell, like before it started, you should have an idea of how you're going to get rid of it first. So, you're going to have planned what the ingredients are, and therefore what they're made of, and therefore how are you going to dispose of them.
I think you're right, Chris. What you're not going to do is you're not going to put someone's image or name and put it in a little box and freeze it in the freezer and then flap and worry about, what do I do now? Do I take it out of the freezer or do I leave it in the freezer? Like many people seem to. Yeah. What I do for disposal of spells is I'm generally pretty much 90% practical about it. I don't want to get in the way of the flow of the spell. So what I tend to use is symbology for that. And we can get into the recycling of ingredients in a minute, but ultimately I'm going to think about the construction of the spell. Most of the spells I do are biodegradable, which gives me a lot of options when it comes to getting rid of them. If it is a positive spell, a nice spell, then I am likely to get rid of it in a nice way. If it is a negative spell, curse, hex, something nasty that retains a nasty, murky energy, I'm going to leave it in a nasty, not particularly nice place. So nice places for healing spells, very symbolic normally. What I'll first do is, if there is a link to the person, such as a poppet, for example, has a link to the person's soul, I will disassemble the spell with respect. I'll take it to its component parts and then I'll put them all in a little bag. Normally it's a little paper bag because I've got loads of those. And then I will go and either disperse the ingredients in the local river that flows away from me. I just like the symbology of it leaving. I might go and bury it somewhere to rot away, degrade. If I'm really lazy, I go and take it to the bin by the bus stop down the road. Maybe I'm passing and I'll just dump it in there. I do put a little bit of thought into the disposal of my spells though, because I see the disposal part still a part of the spell. Not particularly nice spells, I would do something not particularly nice. If I had a poppet of a person that I was doing a hex on and I wanted to cause illness with that person, I'm probably going to go and bury it in the graveyard so that it can rot along with all of the other corpses. I may go and leave it in the dump. I'm going to put it somewhere negatively. Like often attracts like, and symbolically, I am going to go and do that. Now, I'm happy to put that in the landfill, but I'm also happy to put nice spells in landfill as well. But what I normally do is always disassemble the spells. With a nice spell, I'm normally disassembling it because I don't want any negative impact from whatever happens to the remains, the ingredients. With a nasty spell, I don't care so much about that because it's a nasty spell. If I did go and dispose of it in a landfill and it rotted away, and that might just cause extra problems for the intended target. Why do I care about that? What about you?
I think what you're saying about the links is the important part. Is does this work involve a direct link that is active, or was it just a targeted spell that threw, and you're balancing things on how good's my accurate throw? Is it that kind of spell where you're just throwing it at a target and hoping it sticks, or is it got a built-in link? If it's got a built-in link, then you're going to have to make sure that you're either disassembling that link by, like you say, very orderly, taking everything apart in the same respects that you would put it together in the first place, or you are making sure that link is going to wither away the same way that you designed it. I know Lady Poison likes to talk about she'll often flush things Again, you've got to be thinking about kind of the biodegradable parts of the way in which you're disposing of it. Is it safe? So, you know, using all these nylon cords that certain groups would encourage you to use are not going to naturally biodegrade very quickly, or they're going to cause some kind of harm to wildlife, etc. You know, just because we're trying to kill a person doesn't mean we need to take out the local wildlife at the same time. So, you know, it's more a case of thinking about the ingredients that have gone in. I try and plan ingredients that, or which ones I can kind of reuse and which ones I can kind of biodegrade or whatever when you're getting rid of it. Or how safe is it to burn? If you're going to want, as part of your ritual, to release it into the world by burning it, you best make sure that the things that you're trying to burn do actually burn. Like, you know, so it kind of like, I think a lot of it comes down to how good is your planning when you actually create the spell. Of kind of, have you, as Liam will often say, is there a beginning, a middle, and an end? And part of that end is, how am I going to dispose of it after the spell is finished? Like, and I don't think people kind of go as far often as, how am I getting rid of it? They're often just thinking, okay, well, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, and then bish bash bosh, the spell is done. They don't really factor in, how am I getting rid of it afterwards?
One of the things that a lot of people don't think about, and it is to be fair, for beginners at least, a controversial subject about reusing items of a spell, because we're used to reusing ritual items, candles and so on and so forth, for similar rituals. But a lot of people don't think about spells. For some reason, they think that a spell needs to be a self-contained working. And even though I would say most of the time that is true, there are a lot of things that just because it's a self-contained working doesn't mean that you're not adding an energy that you're going to add into other things. I don't go and buy a disposable knife if I want to cut something up for a spell. I use the knife that I use for everything, you know, magically speaking. So the same would be true for me for potentially candles, because they're used again. I wouldn't necessarily burn them all down, or rocks and crystals. Many of these things, I've even used herbs and just kept them in jars. Some herbs I use for the disposal of spells, normally the carrier herbs, but other things I'll actually use and just keep them in jars so I can pluck the jars out before.
I've used a lot of my kind of leftover ingredients from rituals, kind of the herby kind of parts. I've used them in incenses afterwards, you know, where they've retained a particular energy from that chat, you know, from that bit of work, and then kind of ground them up and use them in an incense. Or, you know, I've used them in later workings where I've kind of gone, actually, that was a really good working. I've still got that little bit left. I'm going to use that up in a new spell. What I'd be less inclined to do is, say, reuse the insides of a poppet that I particularly linked, unless I'm going to go through the rigmarole of unlinking it. Whereas those sorts of spells, I kind of, the bit that I always reuse crockery and like glassware, just throw it through the dishwasher, kind of thing. I don't kind of focus too much on those things. The herb parts, unless I've got a similar kind of working, or it's a kind of working that I'll do regularly, then I'll kind of reuse that as an incense or something. But you know, most of it can be cleansed and worked again. Particularly what I won't do, though, is obviously use leftover bits for a healing spell. From bits, you know, make a healing spell from leftover bits from baneful work. You know, the same way you have that kind of grotty pot that you always burn things in, you're not going to then go and use it to eat your dinner out of. It's going to be that kind of becomes its use, and you kind of go, okay, that's my dirty one. Like for me, I do a lot of dye work, and I don't mean killing people. I do that too, but you know, with obviously they have poisonous metals and things that we use in order to, as mordants. So I have a crock pot that I only use for when I'm using dye work, so that I don't poison people by accident when they come round. You know, I haven't bought that specially. It's just that that's kind of happened over time. I use that crock pot for that. Do you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, it's a utilitarian way of processing, of kind of going, well, actually, this knife is really good. You know, like I have a special pair of scissors for cutting cloth. You know, because you don't want to use a blunt pair when you're trying to be accurate at the work that you're trying to do.
So if you want to know what other magical practitioners do to dispose of their spells, you should get yourself over to the Witchcraft Live Facebook group and ask the question.